All right, it's 4 o'clock. Agenda's present. We have agenda's present. Excuse me. It's 4 o'clock, and so the May 25th meeting of the Board of Health is now open. Just for the board, a couple of agenda. Number 3, it says voting of officers. I was under the impression that the selectmen last night would make the appointments, but apparently they did not. June. Yeah, I'm sorry. So if it's all right with the board, we will push that off until June, or at least until after the first time after the appointments are made. If that's no objections to that, that will alter the agenda. And item number 10, the ACO request for 34 Arkansas Avenue has been removed. Any questions on the agenda, objections? Also, I always remind you that these meetings are being recorded. Do we have public comment from anyone on any issue that is not on tonight's agenda? All right. Oh. Just please come forward, identify yourself.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
If you could use the microphone.
I'm sorry. My name is Philip Giuliano. I have a home at 34 Wigwam Road. Is going to be a home which is going to be built next to me at 36 Wigwam Road. My issue was where the placement of the septic system was planned on the proposed septic system and where the well is located on the lot. On my own home, which I've had since 1981, my septic system is in the back left-hand side, and the well is on the front side near Wigwam Road, which is the roadway. The proposed location of the well is up in the rear of the lot, and the septic is in the front of the lot. There are two other two other septic systems directly across the street from me, which are in close proximity to where my well is. My issue was that I was seeking to have that reversed, having the well put up towards the front and the septic system put down the back. I've just spoken with Paul Santos, who drew the plan, and he has suggested that he possibly could move it over just a little bit, the septic system over a little bit more. I'm concerned with having 3 septic systems really close to my well. Even though it may comply with the existing law, the 100 feet law, it was with 3 close. I was concerned that my well may be suffering some adverse problems with the flow coming down from the 3 wells. And so that was my issue, and that's what I try to present to the board. I'm not on the agenda as such, right, because I had missed the time. Even though I tried to get it, my notice in, I sent it to the wrong address, and that was on May 11th. So I would have been in the right time if I had done it correctly. But I've spoken to Art on probably 3 or 4 occasions, and he's been a gentleman throughout, which is very good, and I appreciate his action throughout. So what I'd like to do is, I know your meetings are only month to month. I know the proponent wants to go ahead and get moving on his house, and I have no problem with him moving. My issue is just with having the 3 septic systems so close to my well. My water is absolutely beautiful, probably some of the sweetest water in the whole town, and I just don't want to see that any problems with that. So that is my issue. So whether or not I can have Paul present a new plan moving over the septic so it's further away from where my well is. That's my position
Okay.
and what I'm presenting to the board.
We wouldn't really be able to discuss it tonight because we don't
understand
have
that.
plans and it's not on the agenda item.
I
You're
understand
quite welcome to, I mean, this went through the 30-day period, yes?
I think he's within his 30-day period standing here today.
Okay.
But the green card, and I would have to ask Paul, I know they mailed out the notifications on April 20th, I believe. But when he received that is when his 30 days to appeal begins.
My problem with this is it was forwarded to me in my home down in Naples, Florida.
Yeah, yeah.
And so when it finally got from Nantucket going through Tampa, and when it gets to Tampa, it gets lost in the mail, and it finally gets sent down to me. And I think I got this probably, I signed for this right around the 1st of May. I don't know the exact date.
So is the well is in?
The permit's been issued, both septic
So he's in
and
the
well
30
permits been
days.
issued.
So can we consider this his notice of appeal and then take up the appeal at the next meeting?
I think you can. That's what you want to do.
Gentlemen, ladies of the board? Okay, so I guess we'll say that you're stating your desire for an appeal within your 30 days,
Yes.
and therefore we will address the issue at our next meeting.
Is there a possibility, if I can reach an accommodation with Paul and it's approved by Art, that it can go forward? I don't want to hold up the
The only
proponent.
reason you would come here if you have an appeal to the decision of the health department. So if you and the parties in the health department agree to something and you do not wish to appeal, then you don't have to come here.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
All right, so next, the review of the minutes. If,
I just have one very small, it's a typo under the director's report on page 4. The company is VDCI, Vector Disease Control International.
and I have a comment. I'm not sure we really followed the right procedures. Again, on page 4, up to the food truck discussion, where it says McNabb. It says McNabb told Santa Maria to go forward with the 50-gallon gray water capacity. Is that what I did? If we're really, essentially, we're giving the authority to the staff to make these decisions, so we really should have voted on that. Yes? There was no vote. We did discuss that, and we said, if a truck had that 55-gallon, it wouldn't have to come back to the board. Is that the meaning of that?
What I recall is that Mr. Santa Maria made a comment about the size of the gray water tank and the
Right.
lobster trap, kind of stating that it's larger than your normal. I don't recall it being a criteria of anything for you to vote on.
But this was in the discussion. Remember, we also had a separate discussion on how we would deal with food traps in the coming food trucks in the coming season. That was my recollection, because I remember I actually put that on the agenda to discuss food truck policy. I'm
Right.
in trouble. I'm sorry. I'm having trouble tonight.
Well, right, because we also talked about, transporting in refrigerated trucks
Yes.
for the variance request. But I don't recall there being a gallon requirement as part of that.
I think the intention was to let the health department staff make some of these decisions without having to drag them back to the board every
Correct.
time. And we decided if you had a refrigerated truck and you had an adequate number of tank, then you could make that decision.
Correct.
So that's essentially giving you an option, so I believe we really should vote on that. You all agree?
Sure.
It's just not McNabb telling.
Right,
people.
right.
I'd try not to run a dictatorship here. All right? So this is altering the minutes, so we have to vote on changing the minutes.
That wouldn't change the minutes, but a vote, if you want to take a vote needs to be done. But you
We can do that. We can do that.
can't do that retroactively.
All right. So the minutes will stand, and then at some
Yeah.
after this, someone will make a motion, which will go into this meeting
I
minutes.
think make a motion to reopen it, or do you think it needs to be back on the agenda?
Ooh, you know, probably, I hate to say back on the agenda, but unless,
Yeah. Okay.
I just think it's the
Back on
clearest
the
way to do
agenda.
it.
So we'll put on an agenda for June. If you could propose the wording that essentially to the effect that we will let the staff make decisions about variances on food trucks with the guidelines that there's refrigeration and an adequate gray water tank. Okay?
Correct, yep.
Now let's go back to these minutes. Any other questions or objections? Then hearing none with the exception of the typo, the minutes are approved by unanimous consent. All right. Okay, so now we're going to, Rob McNeil. There you are, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
We just kind of wanted to welcome you to your position. And,
Thank you very much.
And there are certainly some actions between the Health Department, the Board of Health, and your department. So,
Definitely.
and I do have at the end, if you haven't addressed it, some questions about the dump.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman and Board of Health. My name is Rob McNeil, the new Director of Public Works here for Nantucket. I am a professional civil engineer, licensed in Massachusetts. I've been here for a little over, I think it's just under a couple months, and been working together with Natural Resources and with Roberto with the Health Department to address a number of different issues and research a lot of different ongoing activities around the island. One of which is the waste options activities, landfill and solid waste program, and certainly looking forward to working together with both the health director and the board at a comprehensive review of the solid waste program, sort of soup to nuts, including our own operations with the take it or leave it and the current recycling program, the drop-off, as well as the commercial hauling program. So I heard Vector earlier, and certainly we're working with some vendors, Vector being one of them, to deal with mosquito control. And we look forward to continuing mosquito control in the larvicide program throughout the island over the course of the summer. We're in the process of going through contracts now to get the next contract for the next 3-year cycle in place. So you, at this point, certainly know more about how DPW and Health Department have worked together in the past, and hopefully you can enlighten me as well with your questions and how the DPW can continue to serve the Health Department. So I'm happy to take any questions.
Now, I do have 2 questions. Do we, either you or Helene, the Control Commission, it's still missing members?
Yes. Yeah, we need a president, and we're down 1 member.
And that's for the mosquito control?
Yes.
Okay.
And we haven't met yet, so. You were next to my to-do list.
Great.
Is anyone applied for that
I
position?
don't know.
You know if anyone's applied, that's a vacancy. No. The other question is about the time you arrived. The Board of Health had asked the health department or DPW to contact the state about an inspection of the landfill. Because as you know, it's an ongoing topic dealing with pollution and sewers and septics in Nantucket, for example.
Sure.
And it was my understanding that since it was like your first or second day, you wanted to take a deep breath before we did such a thing.
That's right.
Is that letter moving along, or?
So I would say that, again, working with both Natural Resources and the Health Department, DPW has reached across the table to Waste Options. And at that same time of my arrival, there was also some ongoing negotiations between the town and Waste Options. So, in my understanding that the attorneys had been at it for quite some time.
Mm-hmm.
So let's just say that the relationship has needed some mending on the ground for the folks that are dealing with operations day to day. So we've sort of taken a non-lawyer approach. We've come to the table and we've started to develop relationships so we can fully understand. I've toured the facility several times, many times since I've been here in the past couple months. We're already seeing some activities in the positive, taking steps with regard to stormwater. I've met with our team of consultants that are overseeing the construction of the new landfill cell 3A, which is progressing nicely. I'm getting a much fuller understanding of the overall operation. So I think at some future date, very soon, both the health director, myself, and hopefully the natural resources director will be back to provide a report not only to this board but also to the Board of Selectmen. But
So,
I am confident that that steps are being taken to ensure that we are both us as overseers of the contract and our vendor, Waste Options, are taking steps to ensure that we are in compliance with active permits.
so what you're saying is we're not contacting the state at this time for their input until you do some action locally?
Those are your words, but I would say those are pretty accurate.
And when would you since get back to us with a report?
I would say that between the three of us, we would be able to report back before the end of the fiscal year, certainly.
That's June,
End of June.
end of June.
Sure.
Because I don't want to drop this.
No, I don't think it's being dropped. In fact,
because it's clearly a major health issue from our perspective.
well, I think maybe I would classify it as a concern and something that needs to have continuous monitoring, certainly. But I wouldn't necessarily jump to conclusions without getting data, and which is
All right.
what we've been working at, is making sure that we all understand fully what's going on and ensuring that they're in compliance with the permits issued by the state.
Any questions from the board?
One thing I definitely want to add to that is certainly there's never anything to hide. This is a municipal facility, a municipal operation. Although we do have a vendor operating currently, I would definitely invite the board, whether it's individually or collectively as a board, to work with the health director to schedule some time to come out and actually tour the facility. It is an eye-opening experience in a lot of different ways, but I would say in very positive ways. We can all do a much better job, I think, in help educating the public of what is, how they are involved from the creation of trash and recyclables, all the way through the life cycle that's happening on site, and to see sort of how they fit into the mix. And I think it would be very helpful for the board to understand that at a much deeper level.
All right, thank you. I may do that, but I will remind you all, I still want to know what's happening there.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Right. Well,
Thank you.
One of the things we're most concerned with was the scope of the work of what's supposed to be done with this next study. And to me, it seems like it's dragging a little bit. And I thought some of the board members should be involved with getting that designed out there so it gets out to RFP for the people who are ever going to bid on the job. And
What study are you specifically
the
talking
money
about?
that we appropriated to do the study around the landfill, groundwater, Long Pond, near the creek.
So that's completely being done by the Natural Resources Group. What I can say with regard to the landfill and how that plays into this is that currently the landfill is required by the state to, or we're required by the state to monitor groundwater, surface water, and gas from the facility.
Right.
And so we've had a consultant contract in place for many, many years. And so there's quarterly inspections that take place and sampling that go and get lab results. And so that those reports, those quarterly reports, are available on the solid waste portion of the DPW website, and those have been updated right through April, the April reports. We've I'd say shored up or solidified our relationships with the groundwater and the monitoring consultant to more fully understand what it is the reports have been telling us for many years. So I feel confident that we are not we're not unlike many other facilities that are operating or dealing with unlined landfills. We have seen movement where we've seen the degradation of the landfill, and so we're starting to see actual changes in the reporting in the sample results that are showing improvements to the water. So how it falls into how it may or may not have effects on Long Pond is that we're working together to submit a draft request to DEP to eliminate the need for testing specific constituents that are either showing up as not showing up or being reported as non-detect or have showed a substantial trend in the positive direction away from the higher concentrations. In lieu of doing testing that would be more beneficial in the future to tracking exactly what responsibility, if any, the landfill has on the downstream environment of the wetland and the associated pond. So those are the sort of discussions we're having to come back and report back on where we think the next steps should be.
Yes, please.
I'm not sure this is the study you were asking about, but the town meeting did appropriate $200,000 to study the effects of a number of things, the impact on Long Pond, Nantucket, and that RFP has not been developed. The money's not available till July 1st. I'm not sure if that's what you were speaking to, but
Yeah, that's.
okay. But that's certainly you should, if you want to be at the table, you should be at the table. So I think if that's the message you're sending,
Yes.
I think that's appropriate.
And I would suggest that the Board of Health representative should be there, and I would suggest Steve is the person to be that. We need
We'll be
development.
happy to include them in that
Yep.
conversation.
I would please include him,
Absolutely.
because I'm not going to go on. We've talked about landfills and nitrogen and sewers and septic systems forever. We just want to get on with the right information.
Sure. Well, I appreciate the board's patience in me getting up to speed.
A motion of, yes.
So I'd move that Mr. Visco would be the representative of the Board of Health and deliberations and of the development of the proposal to continue research on the impact of the landfill and other areas on Nantucket and
Good.
Long Pond.
Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye. Chairman says aye. Mr. Vesco is our representative in drawing up contracts and so forth. Okay?
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And we have two loan requests. 8 Main Avenue.
I'm going to
Yes,
give you a little background.
yes.
So this is a, small lot over Millie's Bridge in the Tight Tank area. It is in Nantucket Zone A, Harbor Watershed. They have a failed septic system, 5.2 separation of groundwater, and they're obviously going to fix that. We're happy they're going to fix that, but they would like to participate in our loan program, and as a staff, we recommend approving it.
Any questions? Do I hear a motion?
Motion to approve?
Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Loan request is approved. We have another one for 5 Somerset Road.
Yeah, this is a septic to sewer lot, currently on the septic system, and has access to town sewer, and would like to connect, and would like to participate in the program, and any septic system we can get out of the ground, we're happy to do. So we would also recommend approving this loan.
Any questions, comments? Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Further discussion? All in favor of the loan request for 5 Somerset, aye. Say aye. Chairman says aye. That is approved. We have 2 ACOs, one for 42.
Yep, 42 Arkansas, again, technically failed septic system, 5.2-foot separation, small lot, 5,000 square feet. They want to defer a compliant repair by entering the administrative consent order. We certainly are all for that in Nantucket, and would recommend approving the administrative consent order request.
Any questions, comments? Do I hear a motion?
Motion to approve?
Further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
That ACO request for 42 Arkansas is approved. And the last one is 33 South Cambridge.
I'd just be
Same thing.
repeating myself. I said I'd just be repeating myself.
okay.
We're all in favor of.
Yes, fine.
of
Any questions, comments? Do I hear a motion for 33 South Cambridge? Second? Further discussion? All in favor of that ACO, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Chairman says aye. That is approved. Item number 11, 8 Pinkham Circle, variance request, conventional system rather than IA. Art, can you give me a summary, please?
Yep, I'll give you a quick summary. This property's 30,000 square feet, was in front of you a few months ago. They wanted to have a 4-bedroom septic system there. They were required to put in the IA for the bedroom credit. Now they're back in front of you to ask not to put in the IA, where sewer is going to be available. They can actually start the project in September, from what I understand. It's supposed to be completed within a year in that area of Meadowview. So, if we actually had them install the IA, they would fall under your policy of 10 years of use. I think in the short term, 50% removal over 10 years is more nitrogen going in the ground than a couple of years with a conventional
It makes
system.
sense.
So we would recommend it. The applicant is here. I don't know if he wants to say anything or you want to hear
It
anything.
makes sense to me.
Yep.
And we've done this before.
Similarly in North Road and Pippin's Way.
Yes.
And, yep.
Any questions or comments? Do I hear a motion to approve or disapprove the variance for 8 Pinkham?
Motion to approve?
Further discussion? All in favor of the variance for 8 Pinkham, say aye. Chairman votes aye. That variance is approved. Now we have a variance for 77 Squam, maximum feasible compliance.
Quick summary?
Quick
Or
summary.
Would you like to speak?
Well, I don't care. Someone give me a summary.
Okay, here you go.
Arthur Gasparo, Nantucket Engineering. I've submitted the variance request related to the upgrade of a septic system of equivalent capacity. We're located on a 61,000 square foot lot on the east side of Squam Road, which is essentially hemmed in by wetlands all around. And for that reason, we're before you to ask for relief from 5202A in order to allow a soil absorption system within 100 feet of a vegetated wetland resource area. There is essentially no other alternative location on the property which would be further away than what is proposed.
Right.
The system would also include, there's actually already a Septitech IA processor on the property. We would be making significant benefit improvements by increasing the horizontal distance. For right now, the leach trenches are probably 6-7 feet away from a wetland, and we'd be greater than 50, and they're currently in the groundwater, and
Right.
we would provide a minimum 5-foot separation distance, so you can see on the plan that we're doing a mounded system. Additionally, we're also proposing a perchlorate drip dispersal as part of this system, which helps to reduce the overall height of the mound while maintaining the groundwater separation, but it also gives a more even dispersal of the effluent through the field. So, and it's also highly filtered. So I think that all in all, that this application is justified, and I'm happy to answer any questions. I was before the Conservation Commission with it last night. They didn't have any concern. We had to hold it over for a couple weeks for natural heritage review, but ultimately I do expect that it would be approved as well.
If I looked at it, you didn't have a lot of choice.
Correct.
Questions from the board? Comments? We have a very quiet evening here. Wait till we get to restaurants. All right. Do I have a motion to approve or disapprove the variance for 77 Squam?
Motion to approve.
I agree.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Chairman says aye. Variance for 77 Squam is approved.
Thank you very much.
11 Village Way, minimum setbacks and leach field placement.
We have Dan Malloy, he can,
Good evening, Dan Malloy, Site Design Engineering for the applicant. So 11 Village Way, looking for a bunch of waivers for an upgrade approval for this. We've got a septic system, a 3-bedroom house, putting an IA system in, looking for separation waivers from wells, system in a buffer zone, as well as setback to the harbor. The system has received Conservation Commission approval on this, so it's essentially a maximum feasible upgrade situation here. We put this system as far down gradient from water supplies and wells as possible. So this is as far as we can get from everything on the property. We've read the staff report, have no issue with that. There was one question. Part of the waiver request we put in was to ask for a setback waiver for the 10-foot to 5-foot septic tank setback from a property line. We don't technically require it. We can provide the 10 feet. We're only asking for the 5 because it does get us farther from the well. It's not required. So instead of being approximately 75 feet, it would be 70 feet without the waiver. It's at the will of the board. We'd rather keep the separation, but obviously it's your discretion.
Yeah, I don't understand the logic for the tank.
The tank is required to be 50 feet in this case,
Yeah.
preferably. We're just getting it, in this case, it'd be about 75 feet with the waiver,
Yeah,
maybe 70 without. There's no technical need for it.
that's what I mean.
It's just a preference on our side, so we can go
I
either
just-
direction.
I just don't see a health or technical reason for that. But I couldn't go with the leach field. Comments?
No, I don't either.
Questions?
It
Steve?
looks good. I'm for keeping the setback at 10.
Yeah.
So,
I think there's a consensus that we'd be okay with the field, but not the setback of the tank.
That's fine, we can accommodate
Could I have a
that.
motion to that effect, please?
I'll make a motion that we recommend part one, but we don't recommend part two,
Right. Well, the waiver for the leach field, but not the tank.
not the tank.
Do we hear a second?
Second?
Further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Chairman says aye. So therefore, granted for the leach field, but not the tank setback.
Thank you.
Now we're at 11 Mayberry Lane. This is, let me just get my notes. Okay, nitrogen line, sewer. Oh, this is another one where the sewer is coming. Yes.
Hi, again, Dan Malloy, Site Design Engineering for the applicant. So we have property with an existing four-bedroom septic in the ground. House was never constructed, put in around 1990. They're looking now to pursue building permits and move forward on the property. But to bring it into compliance today would require an IA system to get the four bedrooms. It's one of the plus parcels. Sewer
Right.
is coming.
Sewer's coming. When is it coming, the plus?
Construction September-ish. It's out to bid right now, so
Okay.
within the next year, roughly, sewer will be available. So we're asking for a variance so they can proceed under the existing four-bedroom septic. Although, in reality, before they even have an occupancy permit, sewer would be in the street and they'd be connected. So-
Right. This is similar to the one we just did for 8 Pinkham Way.
Yeah.
Right.
It's
And
very-
obviously, we'd agree, obviously, we have to connect to sewer as soon as it's available.
Oh, absolutely. Questions? Discussion? Do I have a motion to approve or disapprove?
Motion to approve.
Further discussion? All in favor of approving this variance, given that the sewer is coming soon, say aye.
Aye.
Chairman says aye, that's approved.
Thank you.
Okay. I just wish this all came before us before the season.
Could we ask
Yeah, let's have Steve.
the building commissioner to kind of give us a
Let's have, yes, because this
lay of
is,
the land?
I've been running around trying to understand this, and I'm not even sure some of these words about variances. We don't really give variances, we give blessings. Is that the way the law is?
Part of my issues with this is that I have talked to my district state inspector, and I have looked at the regulations, and I can't really get a handle on what the exact procedure is. And I'm aware that you're the first step in the relief authority. My district state inspector said that if I chose to accept your waiver, I may, but it's my understanding that the true waiver, or variance, technically it's a variance from the plumbing code, has to come from the State Board of Plumbers and Gas Fitters. So I would ask your board, before you get too far down this road, to seek legal counsel and establish a procedure for these variances, because there's going to be several of them, and it's going to, I think it's going to be pretty complicated. So that would be my first recommendation. If you'd like me to go in a little history of how we arrived here today, I can do that too.
If it's real short.
Okay, I don't know if Art gave you the letters that I drew up and sent out, but basically what happened is there were conversations between myself and fire and the police department about overcrowding and other situations that take place during the summer, some of these restaurants. And they were, as you read in the paper, going in and doing inspections as to overcrowding. I found out that some of the numbers that or were in my files, we do annual inspections of life safety inspections in the restaurants for their exits and other means of egresses, and we establish occupancy numbers. Those numbers I couldn't justify. I don't know where they came from. So I decided that if the police are going to, and the licensing people are going to enforce, then they needed realistic numbers. So I started contacting the restaurants to have them give me floor plans and show me what they had for actual seating. A lot of those numbers came back higher than the numbers on their certificate of inspection. That presented the problem because they were operating above their legal capacity. I then developed a system where they could come in and increase their occupancy if they provided me a plan that was drawn by an architect or an engineer that showed the correct path of travel and their egresses and general compliance with the building code. They have to comply with zoning as well. Part of that component of compliance is with the plumbing code and the formula for the correct number of fixtures per sex and total occupancy. So that's where your board comes in. I believe you're the first step in granting relief to allow these people to increase their occupant load. One of the factors involved with that is accessibility. I am the enforcement agent for the accessibility code that makes sure that they have accessible bathrooms. That's a component in this relief that you may or may not grant that you should consider during your evaluations. And that's the kind of the short overview. If you have any specific questions.
Again, as I understand it, the variance really would come at the state plumbing board.
That's my understanding, correct. There have been a couple of restaurants that have gone through, Fasaro's comes to mind first, that had started at the local level here and then appealed to the state and received a variance. And because they met the various aspects of the building code, I was then allowed to increase their occupancy level.
And so the Board of Health is really, we don't have that power. We can say we don't have any problem with it. Is that it? I mean, we're writing a recommendation here?
Well, I don't have the specific answer to that.
Yeah.
And that's why, again, I would urge you to investigate that and develop a procedure.
Right. And it doesn't, and these are all sewered establishments. It's not like Millie's where we have capacity dealing with a septic system, which is very easy for me to get around my head. This is a little beyond my pay grade, I think.
Right. There are very few restaurants that are not on sewer.
So, and I imagine we have, 5 or 6 here that all be little numbers of bathrooms difference, and I can see 20 of them coming. I need some advice, Jim. I have a thought of what we need to do, but I need some advice, ladies and
Well,
gentlemen.
you do have people here that you might want to, listen to as far as representatives of these restaurants.
Right. Let's hear some representatives from the restaurants, and then we'll.
Dr. McNabb, members of the board, my name is Kevin Dale. I'm an attorney here on Nantucket, and I represent 3, but not all of the applicants tonight, Station 21, Lola 41, and Crew. With your indulgence, I'd like to make some general comments that I think apply all 6 of these applicants and other restaurants that may be in this situation to provide you some context. And then I want to suggest to you a way to go forward to address these issues legally. I think there's a solution here. First, some of this is pretty basic, but I think it's fair to say that the Board of Health, all of the Nantucket municipal officials, the restaurant operators, and the general public want safe occupancy limits in the restaurants they go to. That's a public safety concern. So that's a starting point. The next point is that, as you all know, Nantucket is unique. It's different in kind and quality from everywhere else in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. All of these restaurants requesting variances from these plumbing regulations are located in historic buildings in the downtown core district. They're constrained by space limitations, and they're also constrained by regulatory requirements, specifically the HBC. It doesn't allow exterior architectural changes to historic buildings without very good cause. The Nantucket Board of Health, your board, has recognized that this unique historical nature of Nantucket buildings is important. And you enacted in 1982 a local Board of Health regulation that said if you have 2 bathrooms with a toilet in each, you have an occupancy limit of up to 99. If you have 3 bathrooms with a toilet in each, you have an occupancy limit up to 149. That is less stringent than the state plumbing code, but it's unique to Nantucket, and it's something I think you ought to remember and maybe emphasize when you're trying to come up with a solution here. There's a legal distinction between occupancy and seating. As a legal matter, seating becomes important typically, at least in my 36 years experience, comes about in zoning situations. And many of the restaurants in the core district have special permits issued by the Zoning Board of Appeals that provide they have limited seating in return for waiving off-street parking requirements. That's the quid pro quo that's been in place here for almost 40 years. However, I think all but one of these restaurants has been rezoned from residential commercial to commercial downtown. And the commercial downtown zoning district is exempt from off-street parking requirements. So there is no longer this limitation on seating based on waiving off-street parking. I think that's important because some of these restaurants could have more seats but for their zoning situation, which has changed dramatically. Now, I really want to get in the sticky wicket here, but I have to. There are a number of conflicting Massachusetts laws and regulations addressing occupancy load. It's not just the plumbing code. There are other portions and other sections of the building code that address them. First and foremost, 780 CMR 1004 1.1 establishes occupancy limits based on square footage. This is the best formula to determine what the occupancy limits should be. And specifically, it's a formula that says if you have a table and a chair, or a chair at a table, you provide 15 square feet for occupancy. If you have a chair without a table, you provide 7 square feet. And if you provide standing room only without a chair, 5 square feet. Let me suggest to you that this is a formula that is the best formula to use to actually determine occupancy, rather than the plumbing code or rather than particular use groups, especially for Nantucket. Now, the building code also provides that commercial buildings fall into particular use groups. Use group B, for example, would be retail establishments. Restaurants without nightclubs fall into use group A, A3. That's important because use group B limits occupancy to less than 50, fewer than 50.
Right.
Use group A3, however, allows for more occupants. Mr. Butler is exactly right. Over time, the certificates of inspection for some but not all of these restaurants have referenced improper, misclassified use groups. Restaurants were classified as B when they should be classified as A. That's problematical. So one thing I don't want to get far afield is it may be helpful to classify properly all of these restaurants on their certificates of inspection. There's also what's before you, which is the Massachusetts Plumbing Code, 248 CMR 1010-18 table, the state code, which provides that occupancy is limited by the number of male and female toilets in the restroom. And there's a formula to use, and in simple terms, if you have a male restroom with a toilet and a female restroom with a toilet, you're limited to 60 occupants. And that's why my clients are here today, to ask you for relief from that limitation. Even though one legal route is to ask this Board of Health to recommend to the Board of Plumbers and Gas Fitters to issue a variance relieving these restaurants from the requirement of putting in another toilet to increase their occupancy. We've all asked for that in our variance requests. It seems to me that the reasonable way to proceed, especially on Nantucket, is to act locally and to issue a waiver under your Board of Health regulations to comply with your regulation, which says that 2 bathrooms, male and female, each with a toilet, can have an occupancy of 99 people. And make that recommendation to our building commissioner. Why? Because it's fair. Secondly, every one of these restaurants that's before you tonight has been doing business as a restaurant for decades, not recently. And every one of them has exceeded the occupancy of 60. So I think that the certificate of inspection that reflects occupancy based on square footage with proper ingress and egress, as the commissioner pointed out, Mr. Butler, that makes good sense to me. It makes good sense to me that these restaurants, all of my 3 clients have all been updated their premises in the last 10 years to provide for accessible facilities, to provide for unisex facilities to accommodate women who oftentimes are not treated fairly, frankly, by bathrooms in a lot of public places. They've all worked hard to do it. They've all gotten their certificates of occupancy. Every one of them has had the plumbing inspection done and signed off. And now to impose a constraint on these restaurants that limits a 2-bathroom restaurant to 60 occupants based on a plumbing code that doesn't really address Nantucket like your local regulation does, I think is inequitable. And I think that's the basis, at least for my 3 clients, to ask for a variance so that they have occupancy that's congruent and conforms to square footage based on the formula that's in the building code, and not to, in effect, cut their occupancy, their square footage occupancy, by up to 40 or 50% based on this one plumbing code requirement. As a practical matter and a legal matter, if you want to be draconian, and you have to have fewer than 60 people in your restaurant because of this plumbing code 2-bathroom 60 limitation, when you take away employees anywhere from 10 to 13, you're talking about 37 people allowed in. We all know that the restaurant season here at best is 100 days. We all know that this economy is driven by not just the restaurants, but they're a big part of it. And thirdly, we know, as the chairman pointed out, I wish this had come up before the season started, but these people have to do business. At the same time, they have to do it safely. And if you follow a procedure where you find that you can issue a waiver under your local regulations from this additional toilet requirement, and make that recommendation to your building commissioner, Mr. Butler, as I understand it, can adopt it and subscribe to it and tell these restaurants to go forward on that basis without having to go to the Board of Plumbers and Gas Fitters in Boston.
That's my question. He can do that?
Yes. And here's why, Mr. Chairman, if I may. I don't want to belabor things too much.
I'm not sure either.
But under the Building Code 780 CMR Section 34, existing buildings and historic buildings like ours have a kind of special dispensation that if they can't comply fully with the building code, the building commissioner has discretion to provide for alternative compliance, to make exceptions, to give them wiggle room. My suggestion is Mr. Butler has that authority. And if the state plumbing director is saying, do things locally and defer to your local Board of Health and make a decision locally about this, that seems to me to be the way to go.
Independent of counting bathrooms, I mean, the other things you would take into account is egress and so forth. I mean, there's fire issues here. And
Correct. My role in this primarily is to ensure that the building is safe, that they have the proper means of egress,
Right.
proper width, proper location, emergency lights, and egress signs. This bathroom issue is a part of my code. It's encompassed in it. I have to have compliance with it. But the existing numbers on their certificate of inspections are what they can operate under. The newer restaurants that have been renovated within the last several years, such as Crew and a few others, have numbers that are based on their number of bathrooms, and based on their square footages. I tried to get those numbers correct based on the architectural representations. It's the older ones that have really unassociated numbers. But to be clear, whatever number that they have on their certificate, whether they have 2 bathrooms or 1, if they have 2 bathrooms and they have 70 people, and under the plumbing regulations they're only allowed 60, we don't limit them to 60. They have 70. If they have 90, they have 90, even if they have 2 bathrooms. The problem is that, or the issue is when they only have 2 bathrooms and they have 50 people and they want to go to 80 people. It's that additional 20 that is in violation of the code, and that's the relief that they're looking for.
Yeah, see, I'm having trouble understanding from a health perspective why we're so focused on bathrooms. Because all of these are sewered. It's not. To me, it's silly, quite frankly. I mean, to me, it would be square footage. The ability to get out if there's an emergency would be more important than the number of bathrooms.
All I can speak of.
I mean, am I off base here?
Well,
I'm looking for the public health issue here.
I think
And
the
I haven't-
plumbing code has determined that for the public health and convenience, that in these situations, which are shown on that table, these are the number of people who will use the facilities. That's why you have 30 people for women to use a toilet, so there's a reasonable period of time that they have to wait to utilize the bathroom, and 60 for a male.
That is why, plumbing code does not regulate how many people you can have in a building, okay? I've been in the plumbing business my whole life. The plumbing code says if you have a permit for 150 people, this is the amount of fixtures you need to sustain those people in that building so everyone has a chance
So-
to use the facility.
so you
They
s-
don't say,
You start with the number of people,
absolutely.
not the number
When
of
a set of
bathrooms.
plans comes in and they say, we have a 150-seat restaurant here,
Right.
okay? When the plumber figures that job, he goes to the plumbing code and says, okay, you need so many toilets for this many people, so many toilets for this many, so many urinals for this many, and that's, the plumbing code does not control how many people are in a building. All they say is, if you have this many people in a building, this is what you need for plumbing facilities.
Okay.
And I understand where these buildings are historic and they are old. I understand that. But this goes farther than this. What about someone now that builds a brand-new restaurant and he only wants to have 2 bathrooms and he wants 185 people in there? We've given everyone a variance, so he says, I want the same variance.
Well, all these restaurants applying tonight are historic, they're not new. Let me just, if I may, I don't mean to interrupt. but
Yeah, no, go ahead, and then I see Sarah wanting to speak.
And I've got a question.
Yes.
Mr. Butler's point about only old restaurants that haven't been recently renovated, the case in point, Station 21, which is completely renovated in 2015, has on a certificate of inspection occupancy of 85. It has 2 unisex bathrooms, each of which have a toilet in them. Under this plumbing code, that occupancy would be reduced from 85 to 60. So it does apply to recently renovated restaurants. And the one consistency, and I appreciate what Mr. Cooper said, I agree with him, but the Board of Health should not be in the business of controlling occupancy. It's what the building inspector should do based on the square footage and the safety considerations like ingress and egress, and those things in the building. That's what the building code says, although I said earlier there are conflicting provisions here. But it seems to me that I'm not being critical. The Board of Health is an adjunct to the building commissioner. You could say with this plumbing code situation, we find that a waiver is appropriate. Our own regulations say we can have 99 people for 2 bathrooms. We're going to give Station 21, Lola 41, Crew, Boarding House Pearl, the waiver so that they comply with square footage requirements in terms of occupancy, but don't get sandbagged and lose 50% of their occupancy based on this one state plumbing code provision, which is different from our local bylaw.
Okay, let's hear Sarah, and then we'll have Jim.
Good afternoon. I'm Sarah Alger. I represent the Rainers at the boarding house and the Pearl. And I agree with every single thing that Kevin Dale has said. I won't repeat it. I think he said it beautifully. But I do want to just give you a little bit of background about this sort of rabbit hole I feel like we've gone down on the boarding house and the Pearl and how we got here, just so you understand how frustrating and upsetting this is to find ourselves at this point of the season with this particular problem. The last time the boarding house and Pearl had any work done to them was 1999. They've operated essentially the same way they always have, even historically back when Jimmy Perlman had it, with no real change in seating or occupancy, particularly since 1999. At some point, somehow, seating turned into occupancy, so that the seating numbers that were set forth in all of the Zoning Board of Appeals relief suddenly morphed into occupancy numbers. Well, that doesn't take into account staff, kitchen help, the other employees working at the restaurant, people who are waiting to be seated for their next seating, that changeover period. It completely ignores what has always historically been the occupancy versus the seating. Things were going along great until Stroll of 2016, when suddenly there's an inspection and on Stroll weekend, and we're found to have way too many occupants because the count is a seat count. So we've been trying to work to figure out a way to fix this ever since then. And what we were told originally was come up with a seating plan and submit it with occupancy numbers, which we did. Well, what ends up happening is that's termed to be an addition. We're suddenly changing our use by increasing our occupancy because we're going from the seating numbers of, for example, 30 in the bar and 30 in the patio to what actual occupancy would be, which is significantly greater than that. And so suddenly it's like, okay, well, that's fine. You meet the egress code and you meet the fire code because all these buildings have significant egress and access and all of those things. But you are changing, and because you're changing, you need to meet the plumbing code. Well, suddenly, we don't meet the plumbing code because the total of 7 bathrooms that we have in the building no longer meet the number of allowed occupants based on the square footage of either 15 square feet per table with chairs or 7 square feet for areas that don't have table and chairs. So the next step was, well, then what you need to do is you either need to add bathrooms or you need to get a variance from the state plumbing code. And that's what brings us here today. I think, at least in the case of the boarding house and the Pearl, that they should be found to have been grandfathered. I'm not sure that we should be required to get a variance because we're not really changing anything about the way that we operate. But if you don't feel that that's the case, then I would ask that you do give us a variance because we have 2 bathrooms, 2 unisex bathrooms in the boarding house. We have a total of 5 bathrooms in the Pearl building. 3 of those are for patrons. There's a male, a female, and a unisex. And there's one that's dedicated to an office space, and then there's one that's used for employees for both the Pearl and the boarding house. It's just so hard to articulate, and it's such a frustrating situation. And if this was November 1st and we had all winter to deal with it, that would be great.
I'd be a lot happier if this was November 1st.
I think we all.
I'd be a lot happier if this wasn't a public Board of Health issue, but it is. So, Jim, you have a comment.
A couple comments. I'm still trying to understand the Board of Health impact on this. I heard from Steve that the Board of Health may be the first step in going to the plumbing contractor, but she wasn't sure about that. But I'm very sensitive to the restaurants are like many on that. They're dealing with not having enough staff. They can't hire people. They can't get the visas, and to have this on top of that is, I can't imagine what they must going through. So I don't know if we could just issue a moratorium on this or something. But we have to I think come up with a solution that will allow the restaurants to continue operating the way they've been operating for forever. So I'm not sure if we really need to take action on this, other than to say they should go along as they have been.
I totally agree. I do not in any way feel prepared to make a decision on this today.
Yeah.
We don't have enough education. We don't have enough information.
Well, I've been trying to educate myself today the best I could, and I'm very confused. Let's have one more comment, and then we'll have, because I think we need to find a resolution for this, and we need to find it soon, even if we have to have another Board of Health meeting. I would suggest if we go that way, we have a special meeting maybe next week and not wait another month. But anyways, that's I'm just thinking.
Dr. McNabb, my name is Mary Ann Hanley. I'm here on behalf of Nantucket. Matt Sullivan, the proprietor, is here as well. We have also been talking to Steve about this whole bathroom situation. Ours is a little bit different because we actually have the number of bathrooms that we need and we have the number of sinks, but because we're trying to add some additional seating on the patio, the issue has come up that these bathrooms that we do have are not really accessible from a handicap point of view or a patron point of view. As Steve said to me, well, someone on crutches has a difficult time getting to the bathroom because they have to travel so far. I don't know those of you, I think you're all familiar with the inside of the Jared Coffin House, but you have to walk through the restaurant, and
Yes.
most of the bathrooms in the rear. We have a male bathroom. We have a handicap accessible bathroom there that's unisex. We also have a handicap accessible unisex bathroom that's within the kitchen storage area, which we like to keep mostly for employees because we think from a public health point of view, it makes sense to keep food service workers in a bathroom separate from the general public. I would point out to you that I hope, in echoing Sarah and Kevin's points of view, that you issue some sort of a recommendation or an approval for these matters, because we do need to do business. People like to sit outside. They like to eat outside. We do have patio space that does provide the same restaurant experience that is handicapped accessible. The issue is the bathrooms. You have to, go up the stairs, or you have to go around the building. That's nothing new for the Jared Coffin House. It's the way it was when the tap room was downstairs. It's the way it's been since the big restaurant inside. I can't remember what they called it now, but they had weddings with 200 or 300 people. My client is the first one to help people. If they need to get to the bathroom, he'll get them there. But we just,
Thank you.
It's an accessibility issue.
All right. Is there anyone in the audience that has something, a different idea or anything additional to say that has not been said about this issue? Because again, I don't want to repeat myself, but I'm struggling. It's got to be something really different, because I'm trying to get to a resolution here.
I have a solution which I think is simple and elegant, and would address all the issues that have come up. And what I would
Well,
do,
if you have a solution that's simple and elegant, then you should be a board of selectmen or something.
why not enforce your regulation for the time being,
Yeah.
and say 2 bathrooms, $99, 3 bathrooms, $150, and then let different restaurants do what they need to do with the state boards and make a recommendation they should get a variance.
That's sort of, yeah, I mean,
But will that keep everybody whole?
yeah, I mean,
I don't know. Will that keep all the restaurants whole?
I hate to do something open-ended. We could do something like that. It would give the restaurants an opportunity to go deal with the state, and then maybe we could address it in a month or something.
Or maybe
If we gave a
maybe
waiver
in the
for a
fall.
Yeah.
The whole thing about having to go to the state seems a little.
Well, I mean, this.
I have a question.
Yes.
How do you know when you go to the plumbing board, they're going to give you a variance?
You don't?
I don't know. And you make a good point. It seems to me that a board this august that makes a favorable recommendation for a variance is going to be listened to, because the state authorities are going to defer to the wisdom of the local authorities on this issue. And I'm willing to roll the dice. With a strong recommendation from this board in favor of the variance, I'll go to the State Board of Plumbing and Gas Fitters and ask for permission not to have to put in an extra toilet where there's no room for one.
I sometimes repeat myself, so I'm sorry. You still will look at things like fire issues and exit issues, and
Correct.
because to me, I'm still struggling for the public health issue. I mean, I don't want to make things worse from a safety perspective.
Right. And
If we do give this waiver.
correct. It's not going to make anything for strictly the life safety issue, the egress issues, the fire safety issues. The issue is they have an existing number. They have a number in their certificate of inspection. If you pick the most recent one that we talked about, which is the J.C. house, they have 41 people on that deck. They wish to increase that number to, 80 or something like that. That's what's shown on their plan. The bathrooms that were there, again, I can speak in broad terms. This problem has evolved over time. The restaurants have not kept track of their numbers. The building department has not kept track of their numbers. These numbers bear no relationship or little relationship to the capacity of their building or their actual operating numbers in many cases. So I have a number that I'm legally stuck to because that's what's on the certificate of inspection. And in the case of the prime, it's 41.
So if we get a waiver as suggested that the board is happy with the numbers as by our regulation 82, that would help you, or would?
Well, again,
it would. What would it do tomorrow morning to the restaurateurs?
I'm a little unclear, as I stated earlier, as to the exact legal procedure. Whether or not it appears that you are the first step in the variance proceeding, that they are required to go to the plumbing board to receive these variances from the state plumbing board before I can grant that increase, presuming, of course, that they meet the life safety aspects of the code.
Well, that's something.
That's why I asked you in the beginning if you would please seek counsel and develop a procedure for these, so I have certainty and you have certainty.
But then that to me, it would seem you could work that out from a legal perspective.
I can ask counsel.
From your perspective,
it's your board that is making the determination.
Well, our board could say we recommend to you that we use the Nantucket Regulation 82. The way I'm not a lawyer, but the way I look at the law, we're just an advisory group. We say we bless you, and then you can go on, and the restaurants and the plumbing board, and you can all figure it all out, right?
Right, but if you're if I'm constrained by the regulation, which is higher than the local bylaw,
right,
and the state regulation tells me that I have to have the variance before I can grant. You're not doing these people any favors, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah, but if we don't do anything, we're not doing them any favor at all.
That's right.
And ultimately, it's the state board that's going to have to give the variance. Yeah. So.
And getting town council, I mean, you don't even have clarity of definition here. Yeah. You've got seating that may be driven into occupancy, and so it's. I mean, this isn't going to happen in a week's time or a month's time.
If I may explain the seating versus occupancy thing, if you wish. Occupancy.
If someone else on the board wants to, I don't want to hear it.
No, I would like to hear it.
Then go right ahead.
Occupants is the total number of occupants in the building. That's exactly that. And employees are occupants as well. What's been traditionally happening is that because of zoning implication, they've been counting seats. I've tried to carry that forward as much as I can in differentiating in some of these certificates the difference between seats and total occupancies and listing the number of patrons, because we not only have seats, we have people standing at the bar. So I've been trying to work with the restaurants to try to establish within the parameter that I'm that I'm constrained to within the COI, to make these numbers work and to get them to break down the numbers to be more suitable to them. So if they needed some more people in the bar area or standing area, I could work within the existing numbers. I could manipulate them. But again, I'm constrained by that upper number of seats, which is what the planning board was using or the zoning board was using, or the number of patrons, and they weren't using the building code term of occupants. I'm required by regulation to use occupants, and they have been leaving employees off the COIs previously. So when you had numbers like Lola 41, which on its certificate of inspection says 49, they weren't dealing with the 8 or 9 employees or 10 employees or however many. The previous inspector was just kind of cutting them a break and saying, we're not going to classify your building at a higher use group, which at that point in time would have required them to sprinkle the building we're going to classify your building at the lower use group, and you don't have to sprinkle the building, and you can have 49 occupants or 49 seats, and we're just going to kind of slide the employees over to the side. I'm maintaining that attitude until they come to a point in time and say, we want more people. Now that they want more people, I'm forced to look at all the regulations, which include the health code. And the health code, the plumbing code, of which I believe the Board of Health makes a recommendation as part of the variance proceeding to the state to obtain a waiver from the required district count, which enables them to increase their occupancy.
I think I finally got this down.
Okay.
All right. So what I would suggest, and my proposal to the board, seeing as how we really can't give a variance on this, the state has to do that. And whether it's where it's seats or people or whatever is an issue of zoning and inspection. From our perspective, I have no problem that we state that the Board of Health would not object to the fact that we went to our local regulations of 99 or whatever it was, providing that all other safety issues for the building are taken care of. So, if someone can word that better for me, how do we feel about this?
Is that for the existing restaurants?
Yes.
Is that going to cover any new buildings that have become restaurants?
That would be any restaurant.
Any restaurant.
Any restaurant. Comments?
No.
Huh? Jim, you comfortable with that?
Yeah. I just, what will Steve do with that? Will that allow him to will we keep things the way they are now?
It would, I'm not a lawyer, the way I think it would have to keep things the
good.
way now, because any variance would have to come from the state. What it will do is give the restaurants and their attorneys and so forth a tool to help them with the state. At least the way in my brief legal review this afternoon, trying to understand this.
I still have one question. When you go to Boston, are you going to say that the Board of Health of Nantucket has given a waiver? Because we need to know if we're giving them the variance or we are not giving them.
We can't give a variance.
Well,
Okay.
my answer is twofold. One, I think it's a commendable suggestion that the board moves to enforce Section 1404 of the Nantucket Board of Health regulations for occupancy loads in restaurants. That's the motion, as I understand it. Secondly, I'm asking for my 3 clients, and I don't want to speak for my colleagues, but I think they're asking too, is that you, as a board, recommend to the Board of Plumbing and Gas Fitters, recommend to them to grant the variances we're requesting. Not that you issue a variance or a waiver, you recommend that they grant the variance, which is the procedure, as I understand it, you need to follow. And this is, again, Jim, for existing historic buildings in the core district of Nantucket, not for new restaurants.
Well, see, now I have trouble there. Because then I like to be consistent. Comments?
Yeah, I'm concerned about. Again, we're not exactly sure that we're the first line of appeal,
I actually have. I think we're working to something, okay, and I'm not sure the board's quite ready to get there, and I don't want to wait until June or September.
Okay. I mean, if a new restaurant has to follow the plumbing code, so
right.
It's not going to affect downtown. So anybody's proposing to do something new, they have to apply and abide by the plumbing code regulations.
We could vote to have a special meeting a week from now. Okay? That would give, that's not delaying this 4 weeks, but that gives us all a little time to think about it and maybe talk to our council.
Well, I'm comfortable with the first part of your, just saying we're going to follow the regulations 82
Yeah.
and just leave it at that for now. I think I'd like to give some guidance to the restaurant folks, because I would be in terror if this was something I had to deal with right now.
Yeah, I would too.
Can I just say one thing?
2 seconds.
Thank you. I would prefer, I don't have a stake in this thing one way or the other, but I need something definitive. So if for the people that have requested variances, you either grant them the variance, but by a general statement of saying that you're going to enforce a regulation that is superseded by the state regulation.
That's the problem. But see,
that doesn't mean anything. I can't do anything with that.
if some attorney would help me, I can't.
That's why I
we
suggest you
can't.
take the week
we
off.
can't grant variances.
Yeah, I really think you need to take the week off. I think it would serve everybody exceptionally well, including me, and provide everybody clarity. And we can go to legal counsel, and we can get this solved. I think it's something that they can answer. Short of that, if you're to grant, because it appears you're so inclined, to grant the requested variances, and I can take that and run with it. But I can't take an ambiguity of saying you're going to enforce a local regulation that's superseded by the state.
I think time is critical, and I have a suggestion. Building Commissioner Steve Butler is authorized under 780 CMR 34 in his discretion to come up with compliance alternatives to code provisions like this. And if this board recommends that for the time being, the 1404 Board of Health regulation is controlling and makes that recommendation to the building commissioner and recommends that it be deemed a compliance alternative for the time being until these restaurants apply for variances from the state, that gives them definitive direction, it complies with the statute, meets our needs.
That compliance alternative, you're interpreting that incorrectly. What I can do is accept your variance. If that's the way you choose to go at this point in time for these people. It's as simple as that.
Sarah.
I don't know that I have anything constructive to add. I just want to mention that it's the Thursday before Memorial Day weekend. We have literally been working on this all winter.
All right.
The guidance that we're getting is frankly so confusing. I don't blame this board for not being in a position to act. I don't really even understand what is wanted from you.
Well, thank you.
And
Thank you.
What I'm worried about is what's going to happen this weekend when the restaurants try to operate as business as usual, and now they have inspectors going out every Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, giving out fines, making people
we don't.
leave,
We don't want that.
we don't want that. I mean,
No,
I
no one wants
want
that.
the restaurants to be safe. The restaurant operators want the
But then-
restaurants to be safe. The fact that some of them don't have the right number of bathrooms isn't going to be perhaps the most comfortable thing for everybody, but it isn't a life and death situation.
It's not.
And I would love it for you to find a way to do something that would allow people to continue to operate while we go through this variance procedure, if that's actually necessary.
Okay.
And I think in the case of the boarding house in Pearl, if you recognize that this employee bathroom is adequate for the 30 employees, then we meet the provisions of the local code.
Steve, what will help you, say, for the next 2 weeks to deal with this? So,
For these specific people, or
Yeah.
as the problem faces overall?
well, the problem faces overall, we obviously aren't going to. We need some time,
Correct.
which I said I wished we'd done it in November, but we're stuck with it now.
Right. I wish, trust me, I sent this letter out. I tried to get this ball rolling 2 years ago.
Okay, so
What would help me for
what
the-
can we do so that these restaurants can have a week of peace or two?
Well, they have existing numbers, first of all. So if they maintain their existing numbers within their COI, they would have peace. When the inspection comes and they're at that number, they would have peace. If you took these specific 4 people and granted them their requested variances, then I would have surety. You would tell me that the numbers that they're requesting for their respective restaurants are acceptable to you, and that because they meet their other provisions of the building code, and this is the sole issue, then I could issue them a certificate of inspection. I don't know if I could hopefully get to the paperwork tomorrow. It is Thursday before Friday, before the weekend. But I could issue them a certificate of inspection with those revised numbers based on the board's variance. And I would forward that to the licensing agent and the fire department who do the inspections. And those numbers would reflect, and they would operate on those numbers. And you could deal with the other people at a later time.
But does this board have the authority to do that? That's what I don't understand.
Again,
We don't know.
We don't know.
my understanding of the regulations, based on my conversations with my district state inspector, said that if I chose to take the variance that was granted by the local board of health, I can. Is that absolutely totally correct? I do not know, which is why I recommended that you seek legal counsel. Will I take it and run with it, subject to something happening later down the line? I'm done. I'm gone. I'll take it.
Good.
But that doesn't mean there's other jeopardy out there.
Right.
I think as a practical matter, at least for my 3 clients, Lola 41 Station, 21 and Crew, the occupancy limits that we're looking for comply with the local regulations, number 1. Number 2, comply with square footage regulations to determine occupancy. We're not asking for more than
Okay.
we would be allowed under the occupancy formula in the building code.
All right, another option for the board is we grant these variances for a limited time of 2 weeks.
Or just grant the bathroom requirement for all restaurants for a period of time. Can we do that? Just to
Well, we have these,
not, I mean,
Boris.
well, I don't know if we wanted.
My question is, if we grant this variance for 2 weeks, during that 2 weeks, you haven't got time to go to Boston.
You know, as a practical matter, we're not going to get a hearing in Boston on any of these things until the fall.
Right.
So, I mean, if you're going to grant a temporary variance, at least grant it through Labor Day. Allow us to work together to make this happen and get the variances we need. But 2 weeks doesn't do it.
okay, so if we grant these variances requested till after the fall,
After Labor Day.
after Labor Day, and then we need I hate the term, working group or something to all sit down and figure this out from the various people involved.
Well, there's a working group that started, appointed by the town administration. We discussed at the Board of Selectmen last night,
Yeah.
because this is very complex. So Amy's involved, the fire department's involved, police chief, and there have been some meetings.
So you've got it all.
So, well, I'll not say it's under control, but, this is just a piece of it.
All right.
So-
All right. So I'm looking for a motion that we will grant the variances for Nantucket Prime, Station 21, Lola 41, Boarding House, Pearl, and Crew, as they requested, providing that they still maintain all other safety requirements.
Is it a time for, do you have is this,
Yeah.
We haven't had a motion yet. You can,
Okay, can I have, speak to the issue?
yes. Briefly.
I'll be as brief as I can.
If it's something new,
Get
we
my
haven't,
point across.
if it's something new we haven't heard.
You haven't heard it yet. My name is Larry Weldon. I have interest in several restaurants here over the past 45 years, for which I've been in the restaurant business here. I've owned and operated 7 of them. If you're going to grant a variance to these guys, how about including all the rest of us? There are many some-odd food service establishments around that are struggling with the same thing that everybody else is. I'm not quite sure why this is coming up now, why the restaurants didn't have a seat at the table when we needed to address this. No one has any interest in operating a place that is not safe. To bring this up now implies to me that for the 45 years that I've been doing this, we've been doing it unsafely up until now. And then all of a sudden, 3 days before Memorial Day, when we're going to be faced, 2 times a year we're faced with this. Memorial Day and 4th of July. Occupancy issues are a struggle for everybody. As a restaurant operator, we put our heads down and try to service the public just about as good as we can.
Right. If we did it, my question is, each of these specific requests, if we did it for all the restaurants, how do we do it for all the restaurants?
Just
You refer to your regulation for occupancy rates and say that the variance that you would grant generally would require all the restaurants to comply with Board of Health, Nantucket Board of Health occupancy limits in 1404 your regulation.
Okay.
So just to finish up, if there is one time in the whole 45 years that I've been doing this, that we need some cooperation and some help and some support from our town boards, this is the year. You all know about the H-2Bs. You all know that we don't have adequate people. We are trying to operate in a people that is going to be a very busy summer with about as much difficulty as I can ever possibly remember.
Okay. I think we're getting to a solution for you
Okay,
here.
fine.
One quick question, and I want.
Yeah, no, my question is, when we're talking about granting a variance, is there a time limit on it?
Till Labor Day.
Until Labor Day.
The day,
You didn't mention that, just when you said.
Yes, because then that will give everyone the time to sit down and figure this out.
And it'll be for all restaurants.
Labor Day or until the day after?
Till the day after Labor Day.
All restaurants, right?
To all restaurants.
There you go.
So I need a motion that we grant a variance to existing regulations. I need wording here. 1404.
Nantucket Board of Health regulations, occupancy load.
That we will, all restaurants will comply with regulation 1404.
And we grant a variance up until that.
And
Labor
that
Day.
this general variance will be in effect until the day after Labor Day.
So I'll make that motion.
With all due respect, I can accept the specific variances. I would have to check with legal counsel.
Why don't you do that?
To check, and I would caution you that if you don't grant specific variances, that you feel free to grant the general variance.
We'll grant the general variance. We have.
But the specific variances.
There's precedence. We have granted general variances on issues such as IA systems and so forth. So this board has granted an island-wide variance on at least 2 other occasions. So at least this board has precedence for general variances. All right.
So I made that motion.
We're going to give. I want to do this right.
I know, I just want to make one comment. Since the restaurant owners who are here have made the effort to
I know.
file variance requests, in addition to the general variances, could you please grant the specific
Yes, we'll grant those.
variances for those restaurants?
Yes.
Thank you.
You've done the homework and the work. So the motion would specifically, so that's what I don't like. We could do specific variances for the restaurants that have appealed and authorize the health officer to grant the individual ones?
Sure.
That way, we won't have we won't have a general variance.
Okay.
How's that sound?
And with that, we'll get to Mr. Weldon's point.
That will get to everybody's point.
Okay.
We'll get to the general restaurant. It'll the people that are here now and done the work. So the motion is that we grant a variance to the bathroom codes that we will require. I got the wording here.
To apply the occupancy limits.
To apply the occupancy limits based on the Nantucket Board of Health, Section 04, for Prime 2141 Boarding House, Pearl, and Crew, and that additional variances may be issued by the Nantucket Health Officer. That's the motion.
Wait a minute, health officer may grant additional variances?
Right, which means if you're not one of those, you can call up the health office.
Can I read this back? And I'm gonna
Please.
Okay, I have a motion to grant the variance to apply occupancy limits based on Nantucket Board of Health Regulation 1404 until the day after Labor Day for the 6 restaurants. You still want, providing that they maintain all safety requirements in there?
Well, we'll just,
You put that in there.
you can put that in there.
Leave it in there? Okay. And health officer may grant additional variances.
Yes. Do I hear?
Second.
Who made that motion? You made it.
I made it.
Second?
Second.
Further discussion, please. No further discussion. Further discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Chairman votes aye. Okay?
So just, I mean, this is town government working for the folks that came here, so.
All right.
Oh, boy.
Do you have anything exciting in the direct? Oh, yeah, there's something you wanted us. It's very important.
2 quick things. I'm not going to keep you much longer. I do want to reconfirm that this board wants to hear variance requests for bedroom credits with IA systems in the harbor watersheds and our wellhead protection district. If people want bedroom credits and they're going to use an IA, you want to hear it, you want to approve it. Now, the other thing I just want to reconfirm is that you have no issues with staff approving bedroom credits for properties outside of those zones, that they don't have to come to you for a variance approval.
That's what we approved.
That's what we approved. I just couldn't find it in the minutes, and I just want to reconfirm that's what the direction you all.
It's my recollection that's what we confirmed.
Yeah.
It'd be nice if we could quote a minute.
It was the August 2015 minutes, and we had the conversation, but I just can't find.
Well, let's make it official and have someone make a motion. If someone would make a motion to the fact that we want bathroom credits coming to the board if they're in nitrogen-sensitive area. If they're not, the staff can review those.
Right, and that was bedroom credits.
Bedroom credits. We hear a motion?
Second.
Further discussion? All in favor? Aye. We're just confirming what we did before, but we'll make it official because we can't find it in the minutes. It may have been one of those things like the other one yesterday where Malcolm said or something.
Yeah. And secondly, want to, throw this out there for you, not big on creating more regulations, but this would be, regulation that is necessary and really wouldn't be any cost, significant cost to it. With these innovative alternative septic systems, as you are all aware, everybody has a maintenance contract, and in that maintenance contract, which is required, there is requirements for sampling of effluent to test for the nitrogen level to make sure that the system is operating at 50% reduction or less. Well, with some of these systems, because of their approval through DEP, if you pass the field test, which would be a turbidity, an oxygen, a pH, then they don't have to have an effluent test. So we don't really know. And you're talking about close to 50% of 326 systems that may not be getting tested, so we don't have the data. So the point is, they already got the O&M, you already got the guy going there to do the inspection, it's just the cost of the water sample. So just wanting to, kind of give you a heads up or, some direction as to, is this something you're open
My
to?
suggestion is you put an amendment to the regulation together and present it to the board, and we'll schedule a public hearing.
Okay.
Yeah, we talked about it before, about maybe making it mandatory two testings a
Yeah.
year here, which, we need that data.
We need that data, so what you can do is write up a regulation. We'll have the usual public hearing, and we'll talk about it.
Great. That's all I have.
I have nothing else.
All right, just if you could take a note for the next agenda.
Yep.
We talked about the motion to allow staff to do the food trucks.
Yes, we did.
regulation
I got that,
capacity.
yeah.
Also, I noted in the minutes, Cormac Collier had asked us at the last meeting to include on the agenda a discussion of herbicides and pesticides.
Yep.
So
We'll get that on the
we'll do
next
that
one.
in the next meeting.
Yeah, it's on my list. Sorry, I had some mental breaks today. Anyway, okay, if I hear and no other issues, no new business, no other issues, no objections, the meeting is adjourned.